What would you say you do here?
Game on! Game on!
You're listening to The Review on the OSG Podcasting Network.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Review. This week, it's the review on the road, so to speak, as Brother J-Dub and Brother Wilkie join us from their vehicles. And John and I, we join you from the comforts of our own homes. This is the Online Sports Guys OSG Sports Podcast, college football. It is the subject matter. We talk about everything going on in the wide world of college football. And if you've tuned into us previously, you know the last God knows how many episodes have been about whether or not we're going to actually have a college football season, which at this point, the can keeps getting kicked down the road. That much we will tell you. But here's some of the latest. Guys, the NCAA in their infinite wisdom has decided to delay or kick the can, if you will, their decision about what to do about the FBS programs and Division II, Division III, and anybody else that they legislate in college football. They've decided to wait until sometime in August before pulling the trigger as to whether they're going to or not play. Is this really just kicking the can down the road here, or are they still on that wait-and-see mode? I'll open the floor to whoever wants to start.
Have they set a specific date?
The date, according to reports, did not mention a specific date. Oh, yes, it did. I'm sorry, August 4th. Which is roughly 9 days from.
Yeah.
Denial ain't just a river in Egypt.
Wow.
We're pushing it 9 days here, guys. Is this going to make a difference, or are they really just wanting to see what's going to happen?
I think it's a little of both. I think they want to see what's going to happen, but they also know that media rights money is on the line, sponsorship money is on the line, and who can absorb the financial losses and who can't, and what dominoes will fall. And to me, it just sounds like to me that there's a lot of scared people in that boardroom right now, and nobody wants to make the decision, and nobody has, let's say, the balls
The testicular
to actually take charge and do something about it.
No cojones. Just to clarify here, too, the NCAA doesn't really have a whole lot of sway when it comes to what the Power Five is going to do for their season. But pretty much anybody that's not in the Power Five is under their influence. John, we've seen a whole bunch of FBS conferences already, and we've talked about this in the previous episodes, that have either postponed, canceled, or limited their schedules this season. Like I said, is this really just delaying the inevitable as we get closer to a deadline?
Well, let me phrase it to you. Let me phrase it back to you this way. I think that what you're trying to do is you're trying to have all of the information before you make a final decision one way or the other. And I think that if you make a decision now, then you could have folks like I think we're seeing in the Pac-12 where they're sitting there and thinking, okay, maybe we were a little early and we put our decision in the barn too soon, and now you want to open the barn up and there may not be any animals to put back out on the back 40 anymore. So I think for me, you're looking at prudence when it comes to the Power Fives that are left on the board, the ACC, the SEC, and the Big 12, for the obvious reason. I think it was the Sportico article that came out last week that said that the four-letter has a little over $500 million on the table when it comes to all of their college football rights materials. So for me, that's I would much rather have all of the information before I make a final decision instead of sitting there and going in early and then going, oh, sorry, our bad, and then changing your mind.
J-Dub, the Pac-12 announced this week that they're working on finalizing a 10-game conference-only schedule for 2020. Does this all factor into that?
I mean, it has to. I saw some reports that the Big 12 is losing games and adding games all up and down the run too. So I almost think that I agree with Wilkie and John here. There are too many dominoes still left on the board that people are waiting to get this information before they make it. Now, granted, for those of us that need football to happen, we're like, yeah, it's kicking the can down the road. But if I'm in the NCAA, if I'm running the show, I'm going to want to have all the information so I don't get egg on my face when I make that decision. Because, like you said, they don't have a whole lot of influence outside of the Power Five. So what influence they do have, they don't want to, to impart a Hamilton reference, they don't want to throw away their shot. So, because they're going to have one chance to make a good decision here, and 9 days, what impact really will that have versus today versus 9 days down the road? I mean, to me, I think it's 6 of one, half a dozen of another.
Speaking of that, Wilkie, the word has also come out this week. Both the ACC and the SEC are looking at doing a +1 schedule, and that again is something that we've talked about in earlier episodes of the show over the last few weeks. You see that as a potential good option for them. The SEC, of course, being the big dog in college football, and the ACC being one of the Power 5 schools.
Well, the whole genesis of that, Phil, is they want to preserve the ACC-SEC rivalries, and this is the best way they know how to do that. I'm just finding it very fascinating how all this has played out since the Big Ten announced that they were going to play a conference schedule, and then the Pac-12 dovetailed on that. And the ACC, the SEC, and the Big 12 they've got calmer heads. They've let cooler heads prevail. It always seems like the Big Ten and the Pac-12 have kind of linked together, whether it's the Rose Bowl or whatever. They've always been linked together, and I'm not so sure if that link is as good right now as it should have been. They should have been a lot more patient. But to me, the Big Ten is kind of in a big time quandary because now Michigan State and Rutgers have closed down their practices because of COVID-19. And you remember, I guess it was about a month and a half ago when we saw all the numbers of the COVID-19 positives coming out of LSU and Clemson and the SEC and SEC schools. Yeah, the football factories, I guess, the best way to put it. It seems like to me that those numbers are nothing now, and some kind of herd immunity is within those programs. And now we're seeing all that shift over to the Big Ten late in the game. I just find it fascinating how all this is playing out. And the other thing, too, is when you talk about the ACC, the SEC, and the Big 12, you're talking about football-centric conferences. And the Big 12 right now is really moving up the scale, in my opinion, as far as their decision-making and as far as their football profile, I guess. Because I can see a scenario with the +1s and with the conferences where those three conferences kind of play each other in those +1s or wherever they can schedule, and kind of leaving the Big Ten and the Pac-12 out in the dust. So I just find this all fascinating how this is playing out, and I'm looking to see what kind of solution to all this, because we're coming to the day in mid-August where some decisions are going to have to be made. And I think what's going to happen is college football is going to be really watching what the NFL training camps are doing, because those start up, I believe, this week.
Yes, they do, in full force.
I think a lot of that decision making by the NCAA and by the Power Fives are going to come to see how in the NFL how they handle COVID cases in training camp and so forth. I really think that's going to be an influence to the college football.
Hey,
One
John,
question I do have, if we follow up on that, I played football. Maybe I've been dropped on my head too many times as a kid. I don't do numbers. But waiting to make this decision, does that secure, or does that make your sponsors, your dollar folks, does that make them wary to wait, or does it make them more comfortable to wait? I mean, how the money piece here is the intangible that I just can't grasp. To what effect does waiting have on the dollar sign?
Well, I'll tell you this: if I'm ESPN right now, I've spent billions of dollars on college football with with the SEC and the ACC, and I think they've spent millions of dollars with the Big 12, and they got some Pac-10 influence, Pac-12 influence there too. I'm kind of applying foot to neck a little bit about whether we're going to do this or not. Because of the dollars involved. And if we're not going to play a season, how do I recoup those losses? I mean, I think that is where the whole nervous people in the NCAA boardroom comes from. Is they, especially with the conferences, they know that bottom lines are at stake here. And I think, J-Dub, that is a perfect point. This is a huge influence on decisions. And I think there's a lot of nervous and scared people in those boardrooms.
And what's even worse is if you're ESPN, not only are you staring at that potential loss this year, most of your contracts are coming up. Once you get through 2020, most of your contracts are coming up within the next 2 to 3 years, and you're going to have to pony up even more money.
Well, I think there's going to be some rebate action going on here if you have a truncated season, if you have a reduced season, if you have a shifted season. ESPN will play ball with you to get through this year, considering their ties to basically every tentacle of college football. Their contract that they have with the CFP and the national championship game, the New Year's Six Bowls, all the bowls that ESPN events run, and if I'm not mistaken, they run half of the ones that they air, and they air 39 of the 44 postseason bowl games. So they've got that tied in. You've got the regular season contracts. You have the networks that they're tied to. So ESPN, I think, when it comes to the new contracts, I think that ESPN is going to sit there and say, yeah, whoa, dog, remember what happened last year. This year, I think that ESPN is going to try and put foot to neck and go, look, we have invested all of this into you as an entity. I think that we all should work together in this and try to figure out what can work to give us content and to give you revenue.
And even the lower
ESPN
scale,
go ahead, J-Dub.
I was saying, think on a lower scale, what does this do for the ACC network, SEC network, Pac-12 network? What are they going to do? Because they're also kind of being left out in the cold as well.
A lot of replay games.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you say best of?
But again, you bring up a great point, J-Dub. This is their cash cow. They are in it to show live football games and the replay of the big games that are on the bigger network. But they need the fresh content to satisfy the advertisers and to get the ratings to be able to get the advertising money. This is a tough situation for those networks, and because they don't make money off soccer, they're not going to make money off of the non-rev sports. So this is really a mess for those networks right now, because this is where they, and I think of the studio shows too. There's no fresh content at all, and that's they've built those studio shows around football and the recruiting shows as well. So, yeah, this is August and September going to be real interesting for those people.
And for those of you wondering, we're closing in on August really, really fast. An interesting nugget when it comes to talking about scheduling, Oklahoma this week got a waiver to play their first game on August 29th. With the intent of building in a little bit of pad into their schedule, which is kind of contrary and backwards compared to everything else that we've talked about here.
Well, Oklahoma's not the only one. Kansas, your boy Kansas, J-Dub, they're playing Southern Illinois on August 29th as well. Who does Oklahoma play, Phil?
Versus, I think it's a school out of Missouri, maybe Missouri State.
Kind of overshadows the debut of Bobby Petrino as the Bears head coach.
Everything is circular, isn't it, in sport?
I almost think that ad from Oklahoma was that getting the waiver maybe to make sure to kind of roll the dice here. If it happens, it happens. Great, we've got the game on the schedule. Like with Kansas, lost the game. They got Southern Illinois to replace it. I mean, they're putting all their eggs in that one basket, thinking that the season's going to happen. And I mean, what's there to lose? I mean, literally, if you got the game scheduled and it plays, better for you, right?
Well, you just have to make sure that the contract specifies either the force majeure clause or whatever the schools that are now buying into these games, that they at least get something for their trouble, even if the game doesn't come off to pass.
Well, the Sooners play, assuming they are able to play that game on August 29th, and it's even more interesting to me because they were one of the very last teams to welcome kids back to campus on a voluntary basis for various workouts and things like that. It gives them, their next game is September 5th, and then they're off again for September 12th, and then they're off again until September 26th. So basically, they would be playing 3 games in 6 weeks.
Yeah, they'll have some off time to recover. Let me flip that thing over with Missouri State and Oklahoma, because remember we talked about last week the FCS schools, especially the CAA, canceling football. This tells me the Missouri Valley Football Conference is going to play because you're not going to schedule an Oklahoma or a Kansas with 2 of your member institutions without any intention not to play.
Yep.
So, and that league is the SEC of the FCS. So they're going to play some kind of schedule, and North Dakota State probably has a good shot to win the national title again now.
They're 90th in a row.
Another interesting thing of all this, when we talked about the ACC possibly going to that +1 schedule, word came out this week that if they do that, Notre Dame's going to be eligible for an ACC championship game.
Yep.
Yep. That was that question Wilkie asked me a couple of weeks ago.
We now have an answer to it. And
yeah, Wilkie, we now have an answer.
Somebody's got to represent the Coastal and give the Atlantic a game.
Yeah. I wonder where they would be placed standings wise. Perhaps in the opposite conference to Clemson.
Oh yeah. Oh no doubt.
Of course.
Oh yeah.
Of course. Or they would be a division all of their own.
The Notre Dame division.
Yeah, and if the Coastal Division cannot live up to the expectations for the title game.
Oh, so they're like the runner. So they're Miss Congeniality or the runner-up for Miss America, basically, for the ACC.
Basically, they're that shiny piece on the side there that comes in if you're not if you're not deemed good enough to play in the title game. Think about it. Coastal Divisions had 7 different champions in the last 7 years. They've spun the wheel. I guess it'd be Georgia Tech's turn again because they were the last. They were the 7th. They were the first of the 7 to do it. But they've averaged like 7 wins.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I've never heard Notre Dame referred to as a shiny piece before.
Well, their helmets. I mean,
gold helmets. Come on.
Yeah, they've got gold in their helmets for a reason there, John. It would be interesting to put that qualification on there, say the Coastal, if it's a Coastal team other than Notre Dame, you have to win at least 8 games in order to be eligible for the championship.
Oh, I'd say 9. Come on now.
Yeah, really?
Because I'm not sure anybody there would be able to do it.
Oh my God!
What a party!
But that championship game needs to matter. That championship game hasn't mattered in a long time. I think the last time it mattered was when Clemson and Virginia Tech played in 2011.
Yeah.
And I was there. and
which is an
tailgating
eternity
with the
ago.
Hokie and Tiger fans.
I mean, imagine the parting gift to departing ACC Commissioner John Swofford. Here, Commissioner Swofford, on your way out, enjoy a Notre Dame Clemson championship game.
Oh, even better if he has to give the trophy to Brian Kelly.
Oh, here, part-timer. Thanks, old-timer.
And the thing about that is, if you think of the fan bases, Clemson and the Irish, they really travel. So I mean, you're looking at
That's my point.
Packed stadium.
That's my point, because when Virginia Tech and Clemson played in 2011, that is the closest that championship game has come to being an event like the SEC championship game. Tailgating all over downtown Charlotte. You know, I sampled some really good moonshine from some Virginia Tech people when I was out tailgating.
Hey now.
And the game wasn't bad either. So yeah, if you get Notre Dame and Clemson in a title game, Charlotte will not know what has hit them as far as the tailgating and the activity, and that it don't matter. I mean, you think about the championship, these football championship games. Big 12 was very football centric. It's an event. Same with the SEC. The four of us have been to an SEC title game. I've been to 3 of them, and we know what an event it is. Big 12 is the same way, especially when Oklahoma and Nebraska, Oklahoma and Texas play.
Steve Taylor reference there.
Wow.
Yeah, no kidding. So I mean, what an odd. If anything, this is such a bonkers year to begin with. But if Notre Dame wins the ACC championship game, it's through the roof.
Oddly fitting. Oddly fitting. And speaking of special event kind of games, last story of this block here, for those of you just tuning in, this is the review. We are talking college football. We are the online sports guys. Find us on the internets. Just look up OSG Sports. We'll come up pretty much anywhere you can think of on social media. And same thing for YouTube. We've got a phone app. It's free, as John shows you, because he likes to do the phone shimmy. And he's the only one not in a vehicle right now besides me.
Enjoy all of our shows from the OSG Sports Podcasting Network. The OSG Sports app is up and running. Download it today.
It may not require a textbook, but it's filled with valuable lessons. It may not take place in a classroom, but it's an ideal environment for learning. It may not involve a diploma, but it can help prepare Georgia's young people for life. It's high school sports. High school sports can play a critical role in a student's overall education. In fact, studies show that students that participate in high school sports are more likely to enjoy greater levels of achievement in their academic lives. If you think high school sports are only about competition, think again. Better yet, think about attending a high school sporting event in your community. You'll be amazed by what you see. High school sports, a winning part of a complete education. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
Last thing here, interesting conversation out of Atlanta this week as Chick-fil-A the Chick-fil-A Kickoff Classic game president, Gary Stokan, I know him and I mangled his name.
Gary Stokan.
Mentioned that should they not be allowed to have fans in for his games on the first weekend of college football, there's no point in playing the games.
Well, I mean, they're tied to ticket revenue, and they're tied to the revenue that they bring in for the TV sponsors. So I understand where Gary is coming from when it comes to these 3 games, but at the same time, this might be a part of that +1 theory that we've been talking about because of the games that are on the board. One of them close to Office HD involving Auburn and North Carolina, which was set for their second week of the season. So when you have these crossovers, I think that might be a side run for your +1s, J-Dub.
I agree, because that like Wilkie and I were talking a couple weeks ago about the battle at Bristol between Tennessee and Virginia Tech. These marquee matchups between teams you don't normally play. This is a great way to get your conferences together and play in some ball games. And I think ticket revenue is big, and that battle at Bristol was packed. I mean, they had Bristol Motor Speedway rocking. There was a lot of orange in that game.
Yeah, the 3 games this year that were scheduled is Florida State, West Virginia, Georgia versus Virginia, and North Carolina versus Auburn, all SEC versus ACC games, which would fit into your +1 theory in some respects. None of them involve big travel, but at the same time, Georgia's kind of a place where the virus numbers are growing. There's nothing prohibiting at this time them allowing a small amount of fans into the game. And all of this comes into play. And guys, we're basically a month out from these games at this point.
But I don't think you want to.
If I was the marketing people for these games, I'd be killing myself right now, because think about
he hit his first.
All the missed time you got to be able to advertise. There's so many things that you have to get done. So the marketer, as a promoter, that's rough.
Yeah, because even if fans are allowed to come to the game, you're not talking about a packed house of 75,000 at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. You're talking about, at best, 10 to 20,000, which is what the Atlanta Falcons are trying to do in the same stadium this year, guys.
Yep.
Well, what you'd have is what you would had at Bristol Motor Speedway when they allowed fans in for the All-Star race.
Right.
That's what you'll have, and you'll 30,000. Is it worth it to play that type of game and that kind of atmosphere in front of friends and family? I mean, I equate it to when the SEC men's basketball tournament was forced to move to Georgia Tech, and I'm watching the championship game, and it had all the feel of a high school state championship game.
Yeah,
and it was just odd. And that's how I would feel if I was watching. For us, we John Nelson and I have both covered the Corky Kell, which is a big event here in high school. We've been a part of that before. And that's kind of how I would feel those Chick-fil-A games would be. And so why would you want to do that?
But is any revenue better than no revenue, and putting the game on television better than not having it at all?
That's the multi-million-dollar question.
My guess is it'd be lucky to break even in that scenario. And so is it worth it if you're just going to break even, just going to be able to pay the bills? And then think about the travel costs for the teams. I know it's a bus ride, but is it really worth it to play that game in such a small setting, not as big and spectacular as we thought it was going to be? Because I think it's going to affect the way the game is played if you have few fans out there and it's kind of a dead atmosphere. I'm not so sure it's worth it.
It's like I made the mistake of watching an NBA game the other day with no fans, and it was so quiet to where you could literally hear LeBron James bounce the ball and then count to himself before he took a shot. That's how quiet it was. I mean, and as a player who feeds off of, well, granted, I played on bad teams, who feeds off of crowd noise, right? That 12th man, right? I mean, I think that it would definitely affect the way a game is played into a negative. But on the flip side, I think if breaking even is an option versus going completely in the red, I mean, you have to weigh that ledger at the end of the day. Do you want to have some black in your ledger, or do you want it to go all red? I mean, you got to think about that.
Do you want a lot of red, or do you want less red? I guess is what you're getting at, J-Dub.
That's what I was trying to say. Like I said, I don't do numbers, so math is hard for me.
But at the end of the day, guys, if they play the games, that means we have a season, and that means everything's not going to be a total loss. So you got to look at it that way too. What do you say we wrap things up here on the first block of the show, go to halftime? When we come back in the second half hour, I almost said second half hour, just the second. I
thought you were going to say second half ass.
We got a few odd things to talk about, including an honor for Mississippi a Ole Miss football player who helped bring about galactic change, plus an Ole Miss football player who's in a bit of trouble with the law, and West Virginia looking for a new defensive coordinator. All that more when we return with the second block of the review. This is the review on the OSG Sports Podcasting Network.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency, or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinski of Apolinski & Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
What's his name?
That is his name, sir. Asshole. Major asshole.
And his cousin?
He's an asshole too, sir. Gunner's mate, first class, Philip Asshole.
How many assholes we got on this ship anyhow?
Yo!
Welcome back. You have made it to the second half of the review. This is the OSG Sports College Football Podcast. And guys, I owe the fans in Mississippi a big apology because at the end of the block, when teasing ahead, I called Kylan Hill I started to say Mississippi State running back, and then I caught myself and said Ole Miss. Well, it turns out he actually does play at Mississippi State. And he's in the news as well because he got the key to his hometown of Columbus, Mississippi on Saturday night. The reason? Because if it were not for his words and his actions, I'm not sure we would have had a change in the flag of the state of Mississippi. Is this a case, guys, where a college kid managed to use his voice and his platform and his identity to bring about social change? Anybody?
J-Dub, you want that one? Since you're furthest away.
Sorry, I was trying to fight through traffic. I didn't actually hear the question.
Oh, no, we're just talking about Kylan Hill and how he was honored. Yeah.
I mean, it's a good honor. I mean, some change is necessary. Some change is good. I think it's cool that his hometown gave him that award because Mississippi State doesn't get a whole lot of awards nowadays. So it's every little bit helps.
Yeah. I mean, Columbus is a half hour away from Starkville, and he was honored by the city council, getting a key to the city, and John Cohen said, did a bold and brave thing, shifted an emboldened belief held by many Mississippians that a paradigm-shifting change needed to be made. It was time for a new flag. So, good stuff for Kylan Hill. Very, very proud of a young man who stuck to his beliefs.
I agree. Good job.
Yeah, and it's important, I think, for college kids to know that even though they're not paid and they're not reimbursed for their use of their name, like, and image at this point, although that's about to change, name, likeness, and image, they do have a voice and can reach people if they choose to do it. And it's an important thing for an athlete to know, especially a kid in their 19 or 20-year-old who doesn't really understand exactly what it is that he's got out there. They can affect change on this scale or a smaller scale, but they have to be willing to step up and do it.
Now I remember my first media day at Wake Forest. It was 1991. I was toe-headed, star in the sky, farm boy. Walked into Grove Stadium for the first time. I didn't know what was going on. And we had our calendar shoot, and all of these little kids start coming up to me asking me to sign this calendar. I'm like offensive lineman number 7, and you want me to sign this calendar, right? So, I mean, they're college athletes, regardless of the sport, have a platform. And I think that if you recognize that and understand that you have power with the sport, important, especially a college football player. You're going to have that stage. And kudos for Colin Hill. There's so many other people, that have gone through and stood up for things, and I think that it's very important that an impressionable 19-year-old kid, puts on a uniform for a university. That matters. And there's some people out there, fans are really pay attention to you, and you need to be able to take advantage of that and not let your community fan base down.
Speaking of the state of Mississippi and college football, some news out of Oxford, Mississippi this weekend as Sam Williams, the leading sacker for the Ole Miss defense, who had 6 sacks, 9.5 tackles for loss in the 2019 season. He's in trouble after facing a felony count of sexual battery. The linebacker has been suspended from the team, according to a statement from the Ole Miss Rebels. Not good here, particularly when we're this close to the season. Never mind the legal problems here.
Hey, Wilkie, do we know if the Fulmer Cup still exists?
It does.
I don't know if it does. Does it?
Yes.
Well,
yes.
Let's see. I think that at least a charge.
Spencer still keeps track of it.
A felony sexual battery charge, I'm sure, is worth a good number of points. But confirmed he's suspended from the team, and obviously you're heading into the first season of Lane Kiffin, so obviously not a good look for the program right now, as they're 5 or 6 weeks away from the beginning of what they would like to have for their season to be.
And the news out of we got news out of West Virginia this week as well that troubled defensive coordinator Vic Punting has agreed to mutually part ways with the university after claims of mistreatment were made by sophomore safety Kerry Martin Jr. Apparently, Koenig made a bunch of insults, said some insensitive things, really some stuff that didn't need to be said, and Koenig had been on leave since June, and it now leaves Neil Brown and the Mountaineers. I am all kinds of tongue twisted today, guys. Sorry about that. It leaves the West Virginia football team without a defensive coordinator.
I mean, isn't defense optional at West Virginia right now anyway?
Warning. Orthopedic surgeons are seeing an increase in overuse injuries when young athletes perform the same repetitive stressful motions over and over. Pitching, tennis, weight training, even long swimming workouts can cause overuse trauma that may require surgery. If your kids play and train hard, visit orthoinfo.org or stopsportsinjuries.org. A message from the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons and the American Orthopedic Society for Sports Medicine.
That's the bottom line. The Stone Cold Simpson.
Interesting quote this weekend saying he wants his Longhorns to play Texas A&M Aggies this season, which will be really interesting because right now they haven't announced any schedule changes for the Big 12 or the SEC. But is Herman just kind of wistfully thinking here?
Of course he is. That is a huge political football in the state of Texas. A&M doesn't really want any part of Texas right now because I don't know, I guess they still are kind of winning some of the recruiting battles in the Lone Star State. But that is a huge political football in that state right now. And the fans want it back, but I know Texas A&M just doesn't want any part of Texas, at least for the near future.
No. It was a long time, old school Southwestern Conference rivalry.
Oh, yeah. That was appointment television in my household.
And it's gone by the wayside when Texas A&M made the jump several years back to the SEC, and the two teams haven't met since. They're not on the same schedule. They can't be.
Well, I'll tell you what, Texas, needs Texas A&M more than vice versa. And this is something that Aggie fans are just kind of crossing their arms and saying, yeah, whatever. We're the big kid on the block now. You're not anymore. We've got the SEC banner to fly.
I mean,
You've got your own little conference in the Big 12 that you own yourself.
How wild.
So they realize that the Horns need the Aggies more than vice versa, and they're enjoying it.
Wow.
I will have to say that the midnight yell is one of the coolest things in college football.
Yes,
I still don't understand a word that comes out of Texas A&M fans' mouths on Saturdays, and I don't understand the hand signals either. I'd love a book that would tell me what all of this stuff means, and all of the shouting and all that. I need a how-to when it comes to going to games in College Station, because I've been to them and I've seen this, and I have no earthly idea what any of this means, and I'd really like to know so I could be educated with what happens. The band at halftime is absolutely amazing, but when you see all of this stuff and you're wondering what in the wide world of sports is going on, I'd like an Aggie football 101 when it comes to everything that we're seeing on the field on a Saturday afternoon. But that's just me.
Hey, when I was 11 years old, attending an Arkansas-Texas A&M game in Fayetteville, Reveille the dog lunged after me.
Oh, that's awesome.
Ooh.
That's great. Is there a picture?
No pictures. This is way before the iPhone era.
Oh, see. But
that's why Smokey the dog is the better mascot.
Well, but or is it because I heard that if Reveille is in your classroom, and if Reveille gets up and leaves the classroom, class is over.
It is.
Oh,
You're right.
Even better.
I mean,
Reveille's always a female too.
Yeah.
So I never thought a female would be that aggressive.
You haven't met my first wife.
I will move things along based on that comment alone.
And we're walking out of College Station.
Couple interesting other notes here. Some governors chiming in on college football in New York.
Stop at that point right there. Governors chiming in college football. Sorry.
Governor Mario Cuomo saying that no fans for college sports in New York this fall.
Andrew Cuomo,
Chris Cuomo, some sort of Cuomo. Cuomo's everywhere. They're on TV way too much.
Well, yeah, I mean, in New York and New Jersey right now, I think the most that you can have at any kind of an event like that would be 500 people. And then the Rutgers jokes actually started when Phil Murphy posted that note earlier in the week that you can't have any more than 500 at a Rutgers game. Folks on Twitter were going, oh, so they're going to have increased attendance in 2020.
An attendance boost for Rutgers football.
Yeah.
And in the state of New Mexico, Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham is urging New Mexico and New Mexico State to postpone their games.
Yeah, we're going to have to keep an eye on that one. That, to me, Wilkie is the biggest one that I've seen come across the board.
Yeah, and I hate it when politics gets involved like this. So you're talking about two programs that really must play a football season because even though they're pretty horrid,
they need the revenue.
They need the revenue, especially Mexico State.
Yeah.
Well, the governor can't actually make them stop. She can make a recommendation or suggest it, but she has no administrative power to ban the sports at either one of the schools.
But is that true? Because if they have if they have like you can only have X number of people in a gathering, doesn't a football game go over that?
Well, that's in the stands, but here's something else involving New Mexico. They have a soccer team in the USL Championship, and they are currently right now in the beginning of the return of their season. They had a road game in Colorado, and they bust. They went to Colorado Springs, had their road game, came back, and under current law in the state of New Mexico, they were supposed to undergo a 14-day quarantine once they re-entered the state. Their owner is saying that they are an essential business, and we can do our own self-quarantining and keep an eye on things if we follow testing procedures and all this kind of stuff. And right now, the owner of New Mexico United in the USL Championship is having a disagreement with the state of New Mexico over guidelines if you exit the state and come back. So right now, that's something else that I've been keeping an eye on when it comes to sport in general out of the state of New Mexico.
But college football is not really on the landscape in New Mexico. And I'm just thinking, what would happen if Kay Ivey said he suggested that Auburn and Alabama not play a football season?
Ooh.
That would be political suicide.
She'd be voted out.
Stop
They
laughing.
hold a special recall election for Kay Ivey that moment.
Exactly. So it's not political suicide for the New Mexico governor to say such a thing, because this college football is just not on the radar screen as it is in Alabama and Georgia. I mean, come on. If Brian Kemp or Rob DeSantis both said, I suggest there be no college football season.
Oh, goodness.
Oh, my gosh.
Now, what would happen if the coach, Republican nominee for senator, Tommy Tuberville, said that?
Then Doug Jones would be the senator. He'd be reelected to the state of Alabama.
Yeah, I was going to say, what are the odds of that actually happening?
Zero.
No, I take it a step further. A bunch of Auburn boosters will come to his house and escort him and tie him to a chair and let him know what football means and that he should know better.
Coach, you remember what football means in the state of Alabama, don't you?
You remember who saved your ass when you had a losing season.
Oh, my God. Well, and that's another rabbit hole with Tuberville.
Otherwise, Bobby Petrino would be here right now.
No.
No, he wouldn't have, because he would have gotten fired for something.
Yeah.
And who's Bobby Petrino coach now?
Missouri State.
Thank you.
See, this is how Wilkie brings the show full circle. This is how he does that.
Who were they playing the first week? Oklahoma.
Oklahoma.
Where the wind comes, I said, hey, the wind.
Rock Chalk KU. There you go.
Guys, I want to wrap up the show because I don't know about you, but I'm out of things to talk about this week.
Sounds good. We could keep heckling folks about their driving habits, but we will reinforce the fact that one half of this show was exercising safe driving habits and conditions to make sure that this happened. One local and one exiting the state as he's heading back home, but it's good that we could figure out to do the show in this way. So this one was a fun one. This one definitely goes into the archive.
As I said last week, we're all childs of local television in the 90s. This would not have been possible without a dish or a microwave line.
Al Franken.
It wouldn't have been possible 10 years ago. It's come a long, long way. Guys, let's wrap it up here. Again, it's the blatant promo time.
Yes.
Look us up on the internet, folks, if you want to follow what we're doing. Go to OSG Sports on Facebook or Twitter. We'll pop up. Get the latest from us. Get the latest on what's happening in the great, big, wide, wonderful world of sports. We do have a website in case you're interested in reading my rantings about anything in particular or nothing in particular. It's theonlinesportsguys.com.
Check.
We podcast. This is our podcast. If you're watching us on video, this is actually just the video version of said podcast. Find us at our home base Spreaker. You can find us on Stitcher, Spotify, the Apple Store, Google Play, pretty much anywhere that there's a podcast, we're there. Just look up OSG Sports. We will pop up.
Yeah.
J-Dub, please don't eat your phone. Yes, this is our YouTube channel. If you're watching us on YouTube, or if you're up in Canada, you may actually be watching us on Zingo.tv. They too have a phone app. We're on a couple times a week. Look up OSG Sports. Again, we're going to be there. John's flashing the app because it's what he does.
That is correct.
The four horsemen of the sports apocalypse.
So, for the entire OSG Sports team, for brother J-Dub in his car, Jay Wilkerson, 16, in his car, OSG Nelson here, And I am OSG Phil. We are the Online Sports Guys. Until next week, everybody, have a great time. Enjoy the week. We will talk to you again real soon.